Hello, Haiku here for a historic Pauper deck tech, bringing a slightly unique deck, a fun one that I've been playing and uploading to my channel. I called it Rakdos Cow Cat, basically cow for the Bartered Cow that you're just discarding for food tokens, and then cat since the Cauldron Familiar is a cat. Basically, this is just a Rakdos Madness deck, but it gets to utilize Cauldron Familiar and Bartered Cow as free discard. So one of the issues with Madness is that you have to either crack the blood token, which means you have to pay 1 mana into it, or you have to pay for Faithless Looting, so you're already down 1 mana. And so then you have to have enough mana up for the other spells, especially for Faithless Looting when you're discarding 2 cards. So in an ideal world, you'd have enough mana to utilize both of the Madness stuff that you discard off of it. So I think that's where Cauldron Familiar and Bartered Cow help out, is because both of these are free discards, meaning free as in they don't cost mana. Obviously any card is a free discard, but they get value when they're discarded. So the Bartered Cow will always make you a food token, and then generally you'll have a food token in play to bring back the familiar that you discard, or later in the game you'll be able to bring it back. So it makes like the turn 2 Faithless Looting more viable, because you can Faithless Looting out a Kitchen Imp or a Fiery Temper to remove one of the opponent's creatures and still dump a Familiar or Bartered Cow into the yard. So it utilizes the discard a little bit easier on the mana, since you don't always have enough mana to hold up, and basically you'd need like 4 mana to like Faithless Looting plus Reaver into Kitchen Imp, which is certainly possible late game. Little background about how I got to this deck. So I've been playing a lot of Breathless Night, which I've been uploading to the channel, so hopefully you've been enjoying those videos. And one of the things that I liked about Breathless Night is I was gaining a lot of life, and so it was really easy to win races. And although I'd never played against Burn, I theorized that that deck would be able to crush Burn really well. And so the white cards that gain life is Breathless Night itself, and the 2/1 flyer that draws a card and gains 1 life when it comes into play, which is, both of those are 3 mana cards, and then you get the 1 mana Lunarch Veteran, which gains 1 life for every creature that when the creature comes into play. The black gain life between Familiar and Okiba Reckoner Raid, I felt was enough. If I was aggressive enough, that could see me a victory against mono red. So between these cards, this gains 8 life, that's 12 life, and then I play the full 8 life gain lands that sack, because there's also a sack synergy in this deck. So that's 20 life that this deck just gains incidentally, and in a real pinch, you're also sacking the familiar, the food to bring back the familiar, which gains you 1 life. But if in a real pinch, you can also just sack the food token to gain 3 life instead. And then you have this random one of Vampire's Kiss, which also gains you a little bit of life too. So it's a little bit what drew me is I didn't need as much life gain as the black-white Breathless Night deck had, and you get a little bit lower to the ground with the Madness. And I think picking up Kitchen Imp and Fiery Temper are real big wins. Reaver is a pretty good card. Terminal Agony is an okay card. But these are the big draws to playing Madness that you get. Voldaren Epicure is a solid enabler for the deck. And it's, being 1 toughness is always a liability, but it does fine. The fact that it ETBs and deals 1 kind of synergizes well with these cards as drain cards, as well as Fiery Temper ability to go face, that you can close games out pretty well against a slower deck that doesn't have life gain. But you don't need to, because you're playing out pretty efficient mana threats that are going to beat down over turns unless the opponent removes them. And because they're so mana efficient, you're presenting multiple threats per turn generally. So as I alluded to before, the other synergy in this deck is Sacrifice synergy. So this is this is probably the best 1-drop in all of Historic Pauper right now. And then close after that, I think, is Blast-Runner. And then Familiar and Voldaren Epicure are in here for their synergy, but they're not generally in the league of these two cards as 1-drops. So this is by far the best one, but Blast-Runner is all right. Basically, what I envision the value that I want to get out of this card is attack for 1 time as a 1 power creature and attack 1 time as a 3 power creature. And if it can get 2 attacks in, get 4 damage in, or trade with a creature, I think that it's done its job and what you need out of this kind of card, a 1-drop. So again, building my deck a little bit aggressive to utilize the burn from the Familiar, the burn from Reckoner Raid, the burn from the Epicure, and the direct damage in Vampire's Kiss and Fiery Temper. So kind of trying to keep this deck a little bit more on the aggressive side. And so another thing that utilizes Sacrifice is Infiltrator, which again synergizes with these lands really well. And then it also synergizes when you bring back Familiar, you're actually sacrificing the food, so it grows your Infiltrator. And then all of these blood tokens that you're sacrificing also grow when you're utilizing them for your madness. So if you have the Infiltrator in play. It's probably the worst card in the deck. Vampire's Kiss and Infiltrator are probably the worst cards in the deck. But you just need to play some 2-drops. So I've been talking about the main deck. This is kind of what it did if you convert by mana, the mana cost. But if you convert by actually what you intend to spend on them, is like so this is Madness 1, but you always are having to invest 1 mana to either Faithless Looting or to crack a blood token. So I generally say Madness, the converted mana cost of Madness +1 is what it's going to cost you. So this one is going to be a 2-drop. This is a 3-drop. This is also another 3-drop. This is for free. I just put it in my land pile. So this is kind of what the curve looks like if you look at like what you're actually playing. And you tend not to want to play your Faithless Lootings on turn 1 because you're trying to Faithless Looting into these cards. So that's the main deck. Again, pretty low to the ground, utilizing the most efficient, the best Madness cards, and the most efficient aggressive 1-drops that you can get in red and black. And I think red and black offer the best 1-drops. The only other one that could compete is probably Throbbing Inspector in white, in the 1/2 that makes a clue token. And then the ninjas archetype, obviously they have their own 1-drops that they use. But as far as aggressive 1-drops, I think red black has those. For my sideboard, again, I've just been kind of playing around with this deck, so it's very, very rough. Even the main deck, I would say you could probably, think about cutting an Infiltrator to play more Reavers. Like I said, it's probably the weakest card in the deck, so you can play with those numbers. Let's see, and then the sideboard. So basically, it's just kind of a hodgepodge of what I think is going to be relevant. One of the things is I'm building specifically for the meta of the Wednesday tournaments, which have been the most consistent tournaments in Historic Pauper. So for the past couple weeks, Fairies has had really good showing, and each week it becomes a higher and higher percentage of what the decks are. Like last week, I think it was almost approaching 50% of the decks were Fairy decks or Ninja decks. So Voltage Surge does really good against ninjas, obviously removing their initial ninja enabler and being able to kill the ninja if you get behind. So it's really important. The other thing, it's really nice that Voltage Surge does something even if you're not sacking the artifact. So the competing cards is Annihilating Glare, which means you have to sacrifice an artifact or a creature to do something, and it's at sorcery speed. And then there's also Club, which is at 2 mana, and it's the same issue. You have to sacrifice something for it to do the full 4, but sometimes just 2 damage is enough. And so I really like Voltage Surge as an option. Right now, you know, sometimes you want to kill 4 toughness creatures, and sometimes you want to kill 2 toughness creatures. There's a few 3 toughness creatures, and obviously it's better if you had Frostbite instead of Voltage Surge. So the most played 3 toughness creatures is Modern Age and Core Skyfisher. So if I thought I was going to be facing a lot of those decks, I probably would not play so many Voltage Surge and play some number of Frostbites. Feed the Swarm is flexible in the fact that it can kill Modern Ages before they become a creature. It can kill opposing Reckoner Raids before they drain even more life and then come in when you're going to plan to remove them anyways. But then they also remove auras that prevent your creatures from attacking. They also remove the auras from the aura deck. Ethereal Armor is probably the most important one to remove. So they're overall just, it's a solid removal spell, and it has some hits that it can hit that are important for the deck. And I play one of Debt to the Kami just in case you're not able to kill all of the enchantments and stuff. One consideration with Feed the Swarm is you may want to play more Terminal Agonies. The issue is in decks where you really want to remove their creatures, you don't want to be stuck either waiting for the full 4 mana or having to find a discard outlet so you can cast the Madness. So the consistency of Feed the Swarm is why I put it in, but I could see, you know, playing one more Terminal Agony in the board and you don't have to play full 4 Feed the Swarms. So definitely some adjustments. Like I said, Infiltrator is kind of the next one on the chopping block. You might want to play more Vampire's Kiss as enablers rather than play the Infiltrator. Yeah, and the Feed the Swarm versus Terminal Agony, they're functionally very similar. It's just kind of how mana efficient you want. The utility of hitting random enchantments doesn't come into play that much, where the utility of Madness may come in more, where you want to play that. But yeah, it's a fun deck to play. Like I said, it's very low to the ground and aggressive, so you get into these race situations where, you know, it comes down to 1 or 2 lives difference, you know, who can crack back on who. I think even there was a match that I just uploaded where it literally came back down to 1 life, where I won because he couldn't kill me. He would leave me at 1 life, and then I had the crack back for the win. All right. Well, hopefully you enjoyed the matches, and hopefully you enjoyed this deck tech. Comment down below if there's any card suggestions you want to make. And also, I'm going to be starting a Discord thread or forum post to talk about this deck. And so if you had any ideas of how to improve the deck or changing numbers or other cards that you think fit well in the strategy. One card that I did play with was the Mutt. The one, it's a 2/2 artifact or it's a 2/1 artifact for 2 mana that discards a card when it comes into play. Just wasn't what this deck wanted. I think it's probably on par with Infiltrator, and like I said, Infiltrator is probably the next one to go. You might want to play like 1 more Vampire's Kiss, another Skophos Reaver, and just go down to like 1 Infiltrator. So that maybe kind of changes down the line. And like I said, playing 1 more Terminal Agony is probably in the cards too, just to kind of hedge between the 2 cards. All right, well, hopefully you enjoy the gameplay that this brings. I am going to be playing it tomorrow for the tournament, so hopefully it performs all right, so it can show off that, hey, there's random little decks that really no one has played before that still are possible to be viable. See you later.